the actual alien abduction experience? And did you believe in this stuff before any of this happened?
I had all these experiences my entire life. I didn't know what to make of them. So that's a good question that you bring up. It I didn't really make the connection between what had happened to me and the possible phenomenon of UFOs, aliens being here on Earth and abducting human beings until I started reading these great um, uh, alien abduction books by pioneers such as Bud Hopkins, Dr. John Mack, the Harvard psychiatrist, David Jacobs, and then Whitley Strieber also published his first book, Communion, in the 80s. And I was just astonished, absolutely. It was mind boggling to read in the abduction literature accounts of hundreds and even thousands of people that so closely mirrored my own experiences. I had seen the same beings that they had seen. I'd been in the same type of environment on board what I thought was what I know now was on board a UFO, but I thought it was some type of strange hospital where I saw alien beings that were no more than 3.5 to 4 feet tall. But I before I had read these books in the 80s, I really hadn't been able to integrate these experiences into my life and make some sense of them. But the parallels were so striking, so close to what people had been, the abductees and contactees had been reporting in the literature, that I had to come to the conclusion that not only was the phenomenon of alien abduction in America completely real, but that I was a part of it, that I was in fact one of the abductees. And that's when I could no longer, you know, um, explain away my experiences as being due to anything other than that in terms of interacting with I knew it had nothing to do with interactions with the government or had come out of the realm of my imagination, that it was real and it involved some type of contact that I had had with non-human intelligent beings.
So, what year would this have started, and how old would you have been? And what do you recall from your first experience, what you thought it was? If, as you're
Hmm.
saying, you didn't know what it was until later when these books on the subject came out. And of course, there's no internet in existence um, pre like 1990s, anyways.
Well, the first remarkable experience happened 2 or 3 months before the abduction of Betty and Barney Hill. You must be familiar with that case, Devin.
Yeah, I am very
Everybody
familiar
is.
with that. Yeah,
Everybody
that's
is.
one of the
So
most famous, along with Travis Walton's.
that was September of 1961. Now, in the summer before that, and is when I can recall my first encounter at the age of 6 years old, which is just amazingly the age when most abductees report their first experience, their first abduction experience. And I was lying in bed and I was kind of nodding off to sleep. It was around dusk time, and something attracted my attention. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a glint of light. It was a reflection of some flying object. It must have had a highly polished surface because it was reflecting the waning sunlight you know, quite noticeably. And I saw the strangest looking airplane through my bedroom window that was flying just over the rooftops of the apartment buildings in our neighborhood, maybe 5 or 6 blocks away. And I was fascinated. I wanted to look at this object for as long as I could, but surprisingly did something very strange, very uncharacteristic for me who was a very curious child at that age. I, instead of looking at it, turned my head away from it as if under command and put my head down on the pillow, instantly fell asleep. And when I woke up, I wasn't in my bedroom anymore. I'm not lying on my bed. I'm on a kind of a cold, hard surface. I recognize it as some type of an examination table in what I think is some form of hospital. I remember distinctly that the table being way too long and too wide to accommodate the body of a 6 year old child. It was a very large table for my size. And Didn't know where I was, but I was. Um, my attention was attracted by some commotion, maybe 20 feet or so from the foot of the table I was lying on, and I slowly sat up into a complete sitting position, and I was amazed by what I saw. There were literally dozens of small, 3.5 to 4 foot tall beings that were no taller than I was at the age of 6, with disproportionately large, hairless heads. Half of them were working from left to right, half of them were working in the other direction. And I, I thought they were doctors of some type, but the strangest looking doctors I had ever seen. But, but for some reason, I gathered the impression that I was in some form of clinical environment, there for some type of examination, or, you know, and feared that maybe I was going to have some type of procedure beyond a simple examination. And I think I'll stop there in case you have any questions at this point, or we can move on.
Yes. Was there any type of communication?
What happened next is going to illustrate the type of communication I had.
Oh,
I'm staring at these beings. I don't know who they are. I think they're doctors of some type, but some very small doctors. And the thought occurred to me. I don't know why, because I guess they all look so uniformly similar. They look like clones, same height, same features, same weight. I wondered, are there only boys there? Are there boys and girls, you know, in the group? And it's almost as if some intelligence was eavesdropping on my internal dialogue, and answered the question for me. I didn't hear a voice, but I was made to understand, yes, in fact. Now, how could I know that unless there was some external communication made that would let me know that, yes, in fact, both sexes, as we understand them, as human beings understood them at that time, were represented in that group of alien beings. And that's the only communication I can recall at that time. Other than me trying to communicate with the beings, at that point I pointed at them and I said, "Hey, you're not my doctors." To the effect, "Why did you bring me here? My parents didn't bring me here. I was not told I was going to see a doctor or doctors at this time. Well, why am I here?" I was kind of indignant.
the color of the beings and their clothes. What did it look like?
They looked like they had tight fitting um, bodysuits, all the same, looked exactly the same, uh, but all had a white color that was reflecting light. I don't know what the source of the light was, but I know it was a brightly lit, like a hallway type area that was outside the room I was in. The room I was in was separated from that hallway where these I believe the impression I got that these brightly lit white colored beings were walking by some type of entrance that looked like a probably the size of a maybe a double garage door in a house. Um, but I couldn't see where whether the door had receded up into the top of the entrance, or one of the sides. But it was an open garage door type doorway separating me from, again, the area where the aliens were. Um, and again, but they're all the same color, basically white in color.
And as far as the examination, I guess you're going to get into that as what they actually examined on you.
Well, the problem was at that time, you know, I was a little too assertive, and by pointing at the beings and asking, point blank, what, in effect, why did you bring me here? I called attention to myself, and immediately I couldn't see any being in my room. I could only see the beings outside in the hallway. But I felt as if something from a being that was standing behind me or to right or left that I couldn't see, it felt as if I had a hand on my chest. Actually, it felt as large or larger than my chest and abdomen combined, gently but slowly pushing me back on the table. So that, and then for some reason, I didn't really resist that. I completely went along with that until I was in a reclining position again. And then after that, immediately was somehow rendered unconscious. So I really don't know what was done to me medically, experimentally, uh, during that particular abduction episode.